Glad to see you, Sourav. Yes, I've been listening about the initiatives of the organization of the Tata Steel primarily. We keep getting releases, so your team has been reaching out to us like, well, why not we speak to you and understand more about the initiative and mainly about Samvad because that's scaled up quite nicely. It's been over 7 years, I suppose. Like you did the seventh edition, or yeah, and
This was the eighth edition, so yeah.
the eighth edition. Yeah.
2018 का इनॉग्रेशन आज बहुत शानदार तरीके से हुआ है। करीबन 1700 दोस्त, आदिवासी दोस्त 23 भारत के राज्यों से और 11 दूसरे देशों से हमारे साथ जमशेदपुर शहर में है। आर्टिजन्स हैं हमारे साथ, ट्राइबल हीलर्स हैं, मिस्टिक हीलर्स हैं, स्पोर्ट्समैन और कुछ आउटस्टैंडिंग स्कॉलर्स और स्टोरीज जो आदिवासी भारत एक्चुअली पूरे आदिवासी दुनिया से हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं। मेरा आपसे रिक्वेस्ट है, आप आइए हमारे साथ संवाद के साथ जुड़े।
See, Samvad was set up in 2014 as a platform to understand and appreciate what constitutes tribal identity, right? And with the necessary patience, depth, respect that it commands. Now, the fundamental idea behind Samvad is to look at an inequation right now, okay? Correct that inequation. On the one hand, if you look at the concept of tribal identity, that is typically a source of either angst or aggression, typically, largely, and for various reasons. For historical injustices, for occasionally, not enough time being spent in understanding nuances that tribal communities thrive on, and many reasons, right? And without getting into for a youngster to come from a tribal community is often there is a lot of inherent pride, but there is also angst or aggression that comes with that, right? Or not aggression, but a lack of confidence sometimes.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
To the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, so many of us are now looking at looking at this, running after this little bit of an Eldorado called sustainability now, right? And if you actually get sustainability down, the whole quest for sustainability down to its very basics, it is essentially an inherent, ingrained respect or regard for what the planet has to offer, number one. And look at society which has norms, structures, rituals, which serve to bring people together. And that's what sustainability is. Without placing an industrial lens on it, without placing anything else on it. If you look at these two attributes, they are essentially attributes of indigenous communities, of tribal communities, of the way of life. So the other side of the equation or is that, maybe the answers to some of the most vexing challenges all of humanity faces actually lies with tribal communities, except that do not come to us in very apparent forms. It requires to understand, demystify, respect, what this wisdom means. So, which brings me back to Samvad. Now, on one hand, as I said, identity as a source of, underconfidence, stifled pride, multiple things. But again, these communities, as I said, are holders to answers to some of our most vexing questions. Surely that is something that we have to solve for. And this inequation cannot be solved through specific programs or specific pieces. Our hypothesis is that the tribal identity inequation is best solved through dialogue. Just consistent, continuous, no holes barred, balanced, neutral, positive or sakaratmak जिसे हिंदी में बोलते हैं, dialogue, and that is the platform that Samvad strives to be. It does not strive to be perfect. I think there are occasional errors. There are huge highs to be got here, not just for us, but for people who are part of Samvad. But that is what that is philosophy behind. Operationally, there are the ecosystem, the Samvad ecosystem, the platform that we are talking about has three broad paths. We design platforms which bring people together. One of those platforms is the annual Samvad Conclave that is held from 15th every year. There are also regional mini editions, micro Samvad dialogues, regional Samvads that are held all across the country. We do any to 8 every year, every normal year, non-lockdown, non-COVID year, right? So these are just people are coming together and meeting each other, and for a young boy or girl from Jharkhand to also understand that there may be friends in the northeastern part of the country who are also tribal youngsters. Someone from Gujarat to understand the nuances of just open their eyes to the fact that you may be a young tribal woman from Gujarat, but there's a similar narrative in Kerala also. Just to give solidarity or support to begin with, and then there are dialogue on issues, there are conversations. Our effort is to always balance, get all points of view onto a platform and see what happens. So that's one example.
Give me an example from the rural small conversations or dialogues that you have in there. Like what was the subject like? Who were the stakeholders, participants in the conversations, and how did the conversation go? Like if you have to visualize a talk happening like that at the rural level in a tribal setting.
So, we try and go. Our effort is to go as deep as possible. Okay, in terms of geography. So we've done this we've done regional samvads in Nagaland, we've done regional samvads in Jhabua, we've done regional samvads in Idukki, we've done this in Madurai, we've done this in a little outside Udaipur. So all across the country where there is a preponderance of tribal communities as well as the tribal narrative coming in. These are structured as loose dialogues, loose conversations. Loose in the sense that we don't impose a specific theme or a specific this thing, because the idea is to go and listen impartially, rather than impose a specific theme. So we do have a theme for Samvad each year, but typically it actually comes out of the regional Samvads. We don't go to regional Samvads with a theme, but the regional Samvads actually tell us the buzz this year. This seems to be, what will make sense. Typically, the first of the year are spent in this sort of mode of outreach or reaching out to people, hearing them. 6 months for the annual conclave, for some of our leadership programs, etc. We start with the theme that has come out of this regional Samvad. So that's how it is. Typically, this conversation in a regional Samvad would, let's say, be a 2-day affair. Okay, we've had regional Samvads with about usually not less than 80 to 100 people. Okay, who sort of come together. We've also had regional Samvads with about 300-350 people. We try and see if we don't exceed, we lie somewhere between this amount, because then meaningful conversation also needs has how many people sort of come in, right? And we just listen. And one thing that we try and do in Samvad is something called democratization of expertise. Again, something that we've learned from tribal communities, where you may be a stalwart, you may be another citizen of the country. You will get, say, 15 minutes in Samvad to speak. 15 minutes, so to say. So it's important for us that everyone gets to speak. That's the kind of agency that Samvad as a platform tries to create occasionally. So that's what a regional Samvad dialogue typically looks like. So as I again said, it's not a structured. It's where there are session plans and half-day sessions, and then you can go in and choose which session you want to be part of. That's not how we do it. We typically leave it a little loose around the edges. Sometimes how we structure the dialogue actually comes out of who comes to the dialogue. So going with that, we found it to be a little to be a bit of a hindrance in the process of listening.
So does this also help you in conceptualizing other programs under your CSR initiative? So when you're meeting tribal communities, you have a dialogue with them. There could be issues that they would be talking about that need to be addressed. There could be so many interventions that you would have planned around those issues that came up in Samvad. Does that happen?
Yes, of course. So as I was saying, Samvad has two parts. The platforms are one part of this, right? Where the conversations are beginning to happen. Then the two other parts is, there are specific streams where dialogue and some amount of work also happens around, 6 or 7 themes, and I speak to each of these shortly. 6 to 7 themes which we believe are core to this, largely amorphous construct called identity, right? And then there's a third block where, we work intensively with individuals who believe, will carry the message of Samvad forward, right? The term change makers is now becoming popular, but they are, change makers and much more actually, right?
Correct.
So and each of these ideas, we've grown to have 13 elements. 2 elements are the regional Samvads and annual conclave, and then 11 other components. And each of these elements has actually been born since 2014, has been born out of conversations, what we've heard from people. And as we've heard and we've convinced ourselves, we've heard multiple times that, working on this aspect or, even congregating people together on certain aspect would make sense. We've sort of gone ahead and done that. Now, let me give you some examples. The specific pieces where we work around is, so there are tribal languages, in and around, so in Jharkhand and Odisha. Every year there are about 30,000 who from 6 different tribes who learn their languages, in classes that are run by communities, and we sort of stand behind them in support. So the point again is I begin with language because language is sort of core to many other pursuits on identity. So I think the interdependence of identity and language is something that I think is pretty well known and is fundamental to the discourse here. Right? So the first piece around language is people learning their language and therefore sort of taking it forward. Original literature coming out of this, teaching learning methods in school. Teaching learning material for schools coming out of these language classes. A lot of languages which are typically oral are also now by effort from within community. So
nice.
The typical progression is to having a script to initial literature to advanced literature to that's language division narrative.
So can common public have access, or like you said, some literature came out of those conversations? You must have discovered some literature written in that particular language available there. So do you have access to that? We can create a library or something around that.
So we have a physical library here based in Jamshedpur. Okay, and we are in the process of sort of putting this all out. I think maybe another few more months we'll probably have a digital repository of the material that's come out of this also. And some of the people who've been working with us on languages and some outstanding individuals who, the goal of their lives, is to work on culture and use language as their sort of modus operandi, if you will. Right. So, and there are Sahitya Academy winners who have come out of this. There are translations of, many, leading books into tribal languages that are happening. This entire buzz of language that's being created. Narrative around healers, tribal healers, right?
Yeah.
Which is something out with, which is how do you look at local tribal, not just as a profession, but as a calling, because that wisdom is intergenerational, right?
Right. Right.
Oftentimes it's seen that sort of public program in tribal areas, a public health program in tribal areas and a tribal health program are different things, right? There are some that we need to bring in. So learning from what we've heard, we've almost for the last 3.5 years, we're in the process in Samvad of putting up sort of helping coalesce the first national tribal healers collective, where I think we have healers from about 17 states who are now coming on board gradually. it's a very gradual collectivization process, and we think the only way to sort of take this forward, because whether the narrative going forward is on creating evidence around tribal health, or creating a livelihoods-led narrative, that kind of scale should only come from communities, because this is wisdom that is very closely held, right? I mean, so that a path between appropriation and enablement. That's what we're trying to do on the healers now.
An example from healers world part as well. So, are there some remedies that you have figured out that are like quite successful at the grassroots, and these tribals have been following, and that can be followed by people in urban areas, people like us, something like that?
Physical conclave, other than last year and this year. So there is probably amongst the largest collection of healers who come together from across the country and sort of sell their wares, and you only have to see how citizens react to them. And there are the aspect of Samvad where people wait. People pick up stocks for the entire year when they come in. Where are they? Be they certain oils or certain herbs. I can't claim evidence, I can't claim attributed to us, but we have seen diabetes, we have seen cures for cancer, we have seen cases which have which have been successfully cured on both on lifestyle diseases, issues like cancer. I'm not even talking of joint aches and pains, which of course is a non-issue. But again, what we have in some anecdotal at best, right? And it won't. I'm not sure if it will cut ice for medical discussion. But again, traveling that path is a very tricky path, because this kind of wisdom. There are issues around appropriation, because this needs a lot of patience, and for a collective voice. When we say tribal healing practices, but these are highly localized practices. What you get from a Naga healer, you will get from a, someone from the Nilgiris is not what you get someone from the Aravalis. That's not how it is, right? So that's one piece. There's a art track. There's a music track. Again, we are putting together something called Rhythms of the Earth, which is probably first of its kind music collective where musicians, instruments, tribal musicians, instruments, songs, currently from about 23 states are coming together. This is a group of 75 musicians with their own stories, heritages, etc., who are now beginning to not just gel with each other, but also sort of democratically take decisions, on what they will do. It's a musical collective, of the people, for the people, and by the people. Right?
Interesting.
So and we already, as I said, we already have about 73 people on this. We don't, again, at this stage, and 73 people from 23 states, very committed to music themselves. Not just music for the sake of music, but music for the sake of what it represents and what can put out to the, right? The identity of culture crusaders through music. So we've been collaborating with groups like Swaratma. We've long time ago we've jammed with Indian Ocean. We're trying to get people together. People who are sensitive to the cause. And again, pure enough to seed the stage to the people who matter for Rhythms of the Earth, while bringing in their talent and capability. So that's something
shoot from here, and it can be a music festival altogether, and you have 73 people already on board.
Original compositions coming out, and it's just a fantastic buzz that gets created. So there's about 5 or 6 of these sort of initiatives that have come out of some. There's a wonderful thing that we do on cuisines, tribal cuisine. Okay, and this is in collaboration with Indian hotels. Currently we have many people who join us on this, but we have a sort of motley core group of about 48 home cooks from 17 different states who who are committed to the cause of tribal cuisine, both for its nutritional, economic potential, nutritional potential, cultural potential, what food actually means and represents for tribal identity and culture per se. So two tracks to this. One is, I think, we're trying to bridge the gap between what is where tribal cuisine is right now and the so-called high table, and which is where we have a collaboration with Taj Group, where I think we've just had a festival in Bangalore with tribes of Karnataka and putting out their fare, cooking in industrial kitchens and putting out their fare. People, our typical way of doing
that was happening at Taj Properties. So it's a tie-up with Indian hotels, you said, no? So
yes, this happens in Taj Properties on and off. So cuisines is one part of it. It's quite simple actually. If you look at the large superfoods narrative that is emerging, a lot of this actually are not just offshoots, but actually pretty closely related to the indigenous cuisine narrative, right?
Correct.
So
yes.
That's what we try and do. The third part of Samvad, the entire ecosystem, is where we look at working with individuals who are outstanding, right? So there are three parts to that. One is we have a tribal leadership program which looks at servant leadership, which looks at there's no which works with outstanding tribal youngsters who either have an outstanding vision, have tried something but not succeeded, have tried something or have moderately succeeded, or just have a just outstanding vision in doing something.
Give me an example. This one is quite interesting. Yeah. So give me an anecdote or a story of a child or a person who benefited from this initiative.
We have an alumni base of about 280 people right now, right? Who've gone through the tribal leadership program, which is an 8 to 10 day intensive program that happens once in a year, along with sort of touch point, which spreads over 12 months. And once you're part of the program, you're an alumni. You sort of you're part of an extended family there. Examples, I think, again, as I said, we don't have a हम leadership पे कोई बंदिश नहीं लगाते. We don't unnecessarily define is. Leadership can come in through anywhere. So you have people who are outstanding poets and want to do something for their languages and want to lead that cause. We have people who in democratic processes and therefore are either part of the panchayat process or the traditional systems or the parliamentary processes, and they want to sort of run elections. We have sports persons, we have PhD research scholars, any spark of leadership without Samad doesn't believe in unnecessary burdens, so we don't we have a definition of leadership which is slightly closer to concepts of humility and servant leadership, if you will. Netagiri और नेतृत्व में जो अंतर होता है, the difference between leadership and being a leader. So it's a tribal program, and I'm just struggling to get one example. Out of this, what very happy to give you 20-30 examples of this. Of people. So there are
some story that you might have read recently in your reports or something that came as a supplementing story to the narrative. Yeah,
absolutely. I think my struggle is to pick one, Ranjan, honestly. So no, so there are people who have come in. There are so let's put it this way, right? There are two people who come to mind. Who were sort of, whose mission was to put out stories of injustice, stories of success, stories of, whatever stories they might be, in front of the rest of the world, right? So that was their mission. So they went into the tribal leadership program and have gone on to now set up, local media channels, YouTube channels, and are actually doing reporting, which fills in a very important gap between the mainstream media, local media, and the sort of informal networks that exist, where stories from their own tribes or their communities are now actually going out, and they are now journalists. Let's put it that way, right? That's how they live. That's one sort of case in point. Then we had an outstanding individual who felt that his part of the country and the story of his people, again the good and the bad, right? That's the balance you're talking about. What just people did not know, and therefore people did not appreciate, and therefore there was no conversation around his community. So I'm taking geographies and states out because it really doesn't matter, right? Hypothesis. I am in a place which is very tourism friendly, except that no one comes to my part of the the state. So he said, I'm going to get people to come in. So he started with literally nothing, with one phone call, and now he's a very successful runs a travel firm which gets in people to. I mean, he's a guy from Kashmir. Okay, there are parts of Kashmir where people didn't go. I mean, other than the Srinagar mainstream route, etc. He said, I'm going to get people to my part of the world. It's just the beauty is outstanding, and people need to come and see this. So for the last 3 years after the leadership program, even before it actually, what is his mission? And that's his mission. And he's leading an entire saying that I'm just going to get people to come see, so that people converse about my people, and converse with my people, working beautifully. Political participants coming out of this program, the number of our tribal leadership program alumni who have lost elections is not funny. Okay, but second election, drive that shows is phenomenal because they're still at it. So, the first, there are people who are, who are looking at commerce, who are looking at economics, and they're setting up their own online portals on which merchandise is sold. Some of them, a boy called Rajat Ragatwan, who's doing really well right now, and he has his website. Do look it up. Universal Tribes comes out of Maharashtra, and that's his own Amazon. He doesn't want to be a supplier to Amazon, or no roast that way. He's a digital portal, and fantastically well. So these are people who are leading the change narrative. So that way. So that there's also a Samvad fellowship that we offer. That is the only place in Samvad financial interaction, which is a small grant program, because at the end of the day, if culture conservation, heritage conservation is a little bit of a mad pursuit, if you will, right?
Yep.
And need little support that's available, financial or mentorship or otherwise, when this is at the stage of a crazy idea in someone's head, and the number of ideas which die an untimely death in someone's head because no one supported it then is crazy. Because you not have the ability to write a proposal or ability to write a budget, which is how conventional funds are unlocked. So Samvad Fellowship, we've been doing this over the last 3-4 years. Every year we look at anywhere between 5 to 10 fellows. We have about 27 fellows right now, spread all over the country. This is a 12-month support program, small grant, plus a lot of mentorship and where this is almost like very early stage, almost pre-seed funding for heritage conservation, pursuit of heritage. And outstanding stuff is happening there. Someone's working on a variant of how you can correctly pick up a variant of rock salt that is endemic to his community, and see how we can create. Working on musical instruments. There's an outstanding project that is being done on lullabies in tribal music, and how we can conserve the lullabies, because that's the conversation between a mother and a daughter, and the whole premise is that lullabies is how intergenerational conversations start. What a beautiful way to put that.
True. Yeah.
Lullabies. Then there's then there's a community in India which which is very apocryphically now known as the whistling village of India, where every child when born is given a name which is in the form of a whistled tune.
Okay.
And that's the culture. And there's a fellow who wants to conserve that, who wants to work with that, saying that this can't die out.
It's kind of,
And how do you document that? How do you record that? 5 languages, their first ever dictionaries and fonts and scripts have been made to the Samvad Fellowship across the country. So, again, these are ideas. Sorry, I think it's 4 languages, not 5, but these are ideas which need resources, but sound very failure. And in Samvad, we are okay to have failure rates, because it's a crazy pursuit, and fortunately, the failure rates are not that high.
But somebody needs to support. Yeah, I'm glad somebody is doing that. And this is for the first time I'm hearing this. Like, I often get to talk to a lot of corporates, CSR decision makers at foundation. But this kind of conversation we have never had. And there is hardly anybody focusing on the tribal communities and preserving, restoring, say, protecting the tribal culture. And you've almost got everything in here. So there is this herbs, medicine, literature, art and music. Sounds very interesting. Yeah, it's makes for a good story for me too. Yes, and write about initiatives. How has been your experience? Like, for how long you've been here at Tata?
I've been to the group for about 15 years, and I've been in this role for about 3 years now.
3 years now. So how has been your experience? Like, what were the areas that you were looking at earlier, and then the transition into the programs focused at tribals?
Well, I've worked in the development space before I came into the group, and been with the group across multiple functions. But again, worked on sustainability, ground up CSR for a long while now. Without going into a lot of detail. But I think this particular experience, I think, what you're getting through Samvad is probably a very strong flavor of Tata-ness, and particularly what Tata Steel Foundation stands for, philosophically what we do, because that is one program that we do. Then I think there are multiple other scale programs that, I have had the, good fortune of, being at a stage where being in a position, being in a sweet spot where there are, resources are available. I am surrounded by a team, which will always take the right decision by the community, and that's the kind of team that we've built up. And I think for me personally, I think the journey of Samvad has actually been exhilarating and life-altering, because it's a deeply humbling perspective build.
Correct.
It keeps reminding you how little you know about how awesome the world can be, and it just keeps you very real, and I think gives a real sense of purpose, not just to me, but to a lot of our teams also. And trust me, most of the people we meet in Samvad, in what they're doing, and in how they are going about doing what they're doing, you can't help but be humbled and moved. Saying that, the least we can do is stand by this. What's happening?
Mm-hmm. Probably the next conversation that we'll want to have those tribal communities, some of those fellows who have done some crazy work at the grassroots together, and we can plan a conversation around that itself. Like, we will get to hear their experiences as well. For now, last but not the least, I think I've overshot the time as well. Any message that you would have for young professionals entering the social sector, entering the sustainability and responsibility space that you would have?
So, I think anyone who's entering the space now, first, the assurance that there is a lot left to be done. There is no dearth, of things that can be done. That's number one. Second, I think if there are many newer ways in which people are being left behind, and and some of the older ways have not really gone away, right? So in many ways, this quest is becoming more and more complex, and therefore I think needs very serious allocation of talent and spirit, right? And I think if you're choosing to be in the social development space, I can only tell you that I don't think it's a space to be comfortable. I think there is just a lot to be done. It is an intellectual challenge, it's a physical challenge, it's an emotional challenge to be in this space. And that's why there are, some of the best people who I know who are in this space are in this space because it's a challenge on these counts, and it really needs to.
Great. Thank you so much, Saurabh, for participating in this conversation.